try to get tested unless you just get tested from your house.
Oh, it's still living.
My stupid brother had to go to the doctor today because he went swimming and he got water so plugged up in his ears he couldn't hear. Yes, of course. Do you think Paul did that?
It says published.
So now I'm worried about him because he had to go to a doctor.
Oh wait, I think he did it. Wait, I refreshed it right as I did it. Oh, cool.
There we go. Alright.
Go there.
Sit down.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I did it really quick.
Put on a show for us.
What can I say? Alaska, never since the day I was born, I have not
Wait,
stopped.
it's not you. You're not in it.
I'm not.
Wait, she's not there?
You're not on mine.
She's on my phone.
She's still not on my phone. Or she's still not on the YouTube.
How dare you not put me on YouTube?
2 watching now. 1 watching now. Someone left.
Oh god.
Oh wait, it's like 5 minutes behind. You just sat down.
Oh.
On the YouTube?
Solstice, you sound like my mother.
That's
That
weird.
is weird. Wait.
Who's one
Wave
watching
your
now?
arm. It's me.
Oh.
Nope, you didn't wave your arm. Wait, wave your arm again.
Down the street.
Same, you waved your
You
arm.
need to get up and do something so
Yeah,
we can
you
track
go
this. No, not like that. We need something different now.
Should I do a TikTok dance?
Why is it not? Am I behind 5 minutes or what?
I think this is just what live is. It's not actually live.
Well, but I can't hear it either. Oh wait.
Oh, there. It's just a few seconds behind.
Wait, hold on.
It's like a little. It
It's
like
like-
lags
it's
on
like-
this,
Like a
but
couple minutes
it's
behind.
yeah.
Cool.
It might be because we missed the published part of it instead. The other thing is that the sound is great from you and not from her. Which means it
Yeah.
might be picking up from
From this? Oh, so you're just gonna hear me talking?
That's okay. You have a nice voice on.
I don't need to be talking.
We'll just tell people someone with an accent is going to be explaining it.
No.
People can leave comments. That's how we're gonna ask questions.
we're going to allow them to. I'm going to ask questions to make sure that they keep talking, but if people leave comments, they will. So I'm going to put you in this other chair plugged in so we don't lose the battery. Okay?
Incredible. I'm so well with it.
Wait, Mom, you posted this thing.
No, but it's from the phone.
It's from the phone.
It's perfect.
Wonderful. That's what people are here for, anyways.
Is it on now?
It stops.
I think it just has to catch up.
Oh, okay.
Is this the same thing?
No, this is different.
This is different now.
I'm just trying to catch up. Oh wait, that might be right now.
Can you talk?
Can we fix this?
Hello.
Oh.
Welcome back. My name is Sammy Dunlap, and you're
Talking
watching
on this.
Disney Channel.
It's all the way up.
I could actually
Yes,
see you
I
being a Disney actor, like
that's
a
neat.
Disney child actor.
That's an insult.
It's not. Miley Cyrus was one for a hot sec.
No, she's doing crazy shit.
Yeah.
You just made the Disney symbol on here. How long ago did you do that?
Like 20 seconds.
Miley Cyrus was one for a hot sec. Yeah.
More than a hot second, honestly. What's my show? What's my character, Alaska? Token K character in the Disney show.
I could see you on like a nature exploring thing. Not like Dora the Explorer, but something a little cooler, like adventure, like I don't know, like a nature thing, but like kids friendly. I don't know.
Hi kids, welcome back to Sammy's Nature Extension.
Hey, this thing is not like. Do you see? It's like I don't know, like that. If we play the.
Do you want it closer?
Oh no, but.
It's worse.
No, that made it worse. Hold on, let me just try.
You can go up and down by. You want to go up and down?
No. It's just the angle. There we go. I think that's more straight.
It's better, huh?
Yeah, it was just like facing on to that corner.
Alright. So this is gonna, I don't know if it's gonna suck for you or not, but we gotta be able to get this iPhone as close to the table as we can. So that might be, how do you feel about, just as long as you're outside of the, it'll still.
Do you want me to hide under the table and then sit there? And...
Not necessarily hide under the table, but. Yeah, sure.
I was joking.
With that, can you put it on this? And then
James
maybe
seems happy about that idea.
hiding the table?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Let me get you a book so we hold this. It's so weird. It's like a 5-second delay. So I walk in there and you're like, do you want me to hide under the table? That's great. And the other thing is the mic on the thing. It's on the bottom,
Yeah.
right? So as long as you're not covering, yeah. Okay, so I think that we should just let the film go. Let the movies roll. Until you don't actually have to sit there at all anymore.
Wow.
Right. I'm also going to turn off the lights and let the films roll.
Can I have a water?
Yes.
Thanks. I can, I can get up. How long is this gonna go for?
45 minutes.
Okay. I was just thinking about how long I'm gonna have to sit still and quiet for.
So are we still sitting by this thing?
What?
Are we heading out? Are we like out here?
We're just waiting.
Waiting out here.
Yeah. Waiting for.
Yeah, you can call me.
Yeah, I'll stop you right now. Yes. So I'll turn the lights on. I'll do a little introduction and bring you guys in, and then I mean I've got a question. We can just go.
Okay, good.
Conversation.
I'm like, I just don't even know. I'm like, I know what I made.
Sure. So I'm going to be a little bit off camera, and I'll moderate.
Okay.
I'll only jump in when I need to. If it's going, I'll load it around, so that's for sure.
Yeah.
If people start posing questions via the page, Sammy is going to run in and say, hey, we got a
Wait, right, is that blue? Fish? Or I don't know if it's maybe because like I'll go right blue. We're all wearing really beautiful textures. We are.
Okay, sweet. I'm very curious how many of you
everybody. Okay. Thanks for joining us through this new medium, new to us. I hope everyone is staying safe and staying smart, and together we'll all get through this. You've tuned into the live stream of the curatorial talk at the Hand Art Center at Stanford University. Tonight we'll be speaking with 3 faculty curators of our current exhibitions, Lusa Molnar, Madison Creech, and Katie Paseski. Before we begin, I'm obligated to ask you to like and subscribe to our page. If you like what we do, if you want to get further involved, visit our website at handartcenter.org, or you can find us through stetson.edu. During the panel talk, you can post questions to our panel members in the comment section down below. That's what they do, right? They point out. Okay, without further ado then, tonight's panelists, Madison Creech, Lusa Molnar, and Katie Paseski. Close. So let's start with just a really quick introduction to your projects. In case anyone hasn't been watching our Instagram page or our Facebook or our website, if you could please just introduce yourself and give us maybe the 10-second version of what you've done, starting with Lusa.
Hi, I'm Lusa Molnar. I teach in the studio art program at Stetson, mostly painting and drawing, and I curated Over Yonder here at the Hand Art Center, which is a show of 10 pieces of video art by artists from 10 different states in the South.
I'm Katie Paseski. I teach ceramics and sculpture here at Stetson. I created a show based off of our collection that we have here at Stetson, ceramic work called Clay Legacies.
Hi, I'm Madison Creech. I teach in digital arts. I curated a show in the Oscar Blumner Gallery, but it was a little bit of a curation and a response. So I picked some works from Oscar Blumner and then responded with installation pieces.
So that's actually, well, thank you very much and welcome. And that's a great prompt for the first question I wanted to ask. So we're going to start with you. Great. So like many creative projects, like writing poetry or music or something, the initial inspiration can be a concept, or it can be a lick or a lyric or an object. So my question then for each of you, and we'll start with Madison, is that initial inspiration. Did you see an object and it inspired the rest of the project, or did you have a concept and go looking for objects?
Yeah, I guess it would have to be starting with an object, and more so a series of objects, because I was responding to the Oscar Blumner collection, and that is we have a gallery for that, and there's exhibitions of Oscar Blumner's work up at all times. And so I've been able to see his work over the past few years, and so I've known about his work, but I do feel like the concept was presented to me actually by Lusa, and so I didn't work specifically from paintings, and then it sort of pivoted to this big concept of creating these silhouettes and or these vignettes and these installation pieces that were responding then directly to Oscar Blumner's work. I had an awesome opportunity to work with Abby Ramsbottom, and she sort of walked me through some of the major themes of Oscar Blumner, and so that sort of started my selection process of breaking it down into vignettes that responded to his charcoal work, then a series of landscape in color pencil and pastel, and his series of moons. And so I sort of started to break it down, and then started creating work. It kind of ebbed and flowed of the concept and then responding to a piece. Yeah, I think I answered that.
Yes, you did. Professor Paseski?
Same. Lusa inspired the concept for Clay Legacy, but also checking out the collection. Ceramics is part of this long history of professors folding into students then becoming professors. So it was natural kind of to create these clusters of families, as I start to nickname them, and then build outward from the collection we have. So, yeah.
So part of my inspiration was just logistical. The hand was, in a period of transition with James coming in as our new director, and so I wanted to bring in a show that was very easy to install, which is video art is. In some ways, there are no paintings to hang, there's nothing to ship. And also kind of with two sort of longer standing interests of mine. I have a close friend who I went to grad school with who's in the show, Virginia Urick, who's from South Carolina and who works in video. And her work, I think, is really special and has been really special to me. And I often, I'm a painter and I work with very physical things, and I often actually have a really hard time connecting to video art. So part of my goal with the show is actually to sort of challenge myself to find the types of digital media and the types of video art that I did feel like I could connect to emotionally, and to sort of open up that conversation for other people. And I think it's a challenging medium because we're so inundated with digital video all the time. That to sort of transform it into that level of art can, you really have to push the boundary and do something unexpected. And then the other interest is, I grew up in the South, I grew up in North Carolina, and then went to New York for grad school, and so now being back in Florida, I'm interested in starting kind of these collectives and conversations in the South with Southern artists, and kind of, letting people know that we exist and that there is potential for sort of really great conversations around art, communities around art to happen in places that aren't New York and LA.
It's an interesting take. So you put together this catalog, and it's got artist statements from all of the contributing filmmakers, but it's also a really great curatorial statement. And you touch on that a little bit about the bookends of art being on the coasts, right, New York and LA. And could you speak further about the place of Southern arts? And a lot of these filmmakers don't actually live in the South anymore, right? So unlike you, they left and didn't find their way back.
Yeah, I think it's challenging. As an artist, you're already kind of doing things that are so isolated. Being in the studio, I think, in many ways is inherently a solitary act, and so I think building a community is so vital to every artist's survival. And so I think people do leave and go to New York and LA and where that becomes a little bit easier. Because it's so needed, and you already have so many other things that you're kind of struggling with, day jobs and time, and just the question of what art to make and how. And so I think it's sort of natural to gravitate towards somewhere where at least that community already sort of exists and you don't have to build it yourself. But I do think there are a lot of really interesting things happening in the South. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which has a museum called SECA, which is the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Art. And I think kind of growing up around that environment, they brought in really unusual, really great artists, mostly from North Carolina, but from other southern states as well. And that always kind of stuck out in my mind as something really unusual that was happening in the 90s, 2000s that a lot of places weren't doing. And there are some really interesting shows. We have the Crystal Bridges Museum now is doing a lot of stuff with southern artists. So there's definitely kind of a shifting focus. And I think it's part of it too is that people who are from the South, even if we sort of hate that title and kind of reject it in some ways, there is such an identity to the South and to specific Southern states that I think a lot of people are touching on those themes in their art too. So even if you live in New York or Berlin or wherever, I think there's a lot of people there's this kind of Southern flavor that still finds its way in, and that sort of point of connection too.
Yeah, a really strong sense of community that can bring people back in. The same can be true, not necessarily with the location, but also with medium. And Katie might have discovered that. I've always heard how small the world of ceramics actually is. So you opened one door with this exhibit.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about all those other doors that opened, people that contributed?
Yes. So I found myself being a little bit bashful, not being connected necessarily one leap away from people who are here in Florida or closer to the states that touch us. But as I kind of dug into my research, I found out that my friend Paul was, a descendant of Ted, who's in Georgia. So my connection would be not far, actually, once I dug in and really kind of put the time into thinking about who we have and then who they're connected to, and then talking to people, like cold emailing and reaching out and talking to old cohorts and people like that who are friends of friends, very interconnected. Yeah.
And some of the artists are actually related, or at least were married at some point.
Yes, yeah, I loved kind of putting a spotlight on that. Eva Kwong and Kirk Mangus, who are the professors of my old colleague back in Iowa, Zach Wooler, there. And a lot of these couples kind of built their community around the places where they would teach or work, and they also kind of made this nice horizontal network, so you couldn't really talk about one without the other, which I think is another beautiful aspect of the ceramic world.
So one about geography and one about medium, and then Madison, of course, it centers a little more on like a time frame, right? So Blumenauer is a chapter in a period of art history.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh. Were there discoveries you made diving into that?
Well, I guess the major discovery, which maybe there's been a couple of other exhibitions that have touched on or have really navigated this much more than I did, but I thought that it was really interesting, was that Oscar Blumenauer was not made famous until after he died. He actually sort of had a very grim ending, lost his vision, and committed suicide, and then his work becomes famous. And I thought that was really sad. The other things that I learned through looking at the other exhibitions was that his work was not considered in this realm of postmodernist work because he wasn't included in this one exhibition that was put on at the time that type of painting was being explored, so it was never totally finished. So he was sort of not included in all of history until later on when this collection was found and sort of given a home for at the Hand Art Center. So I thought there's some interesting things of not being seen that I really wanted to pick apart when I was making the work. And then the other thing that I thought that was interesting that I uncovered just talking with Abby, was that the work was sort of shoved under couches, sort of hanging on walls, stuffed in cupboards. It was not cared for as it is now. And so I really wanted my vignettes to kind of point back to the home environment of where this work was found. And so I used a lot of textile and fabrics that were digitally printed to sort of reference that in these little home spaces. Yeah, and in creating those vignettes and in creating those presentations, you relied a bit on technology, and these days we're extremely dependent on it. Obviously now they're digital, but do you find that the use of technology actually helps the process, or is it stimulating? Absolutely. So I feel like the entire exhibition was so reliant on technology. It was the exhibit was sort of thought out and proposed in a very short timeline, and so that's one necessary means of needing that. There's no way I'm a screen printer, and there's no way I could have screen printed all of that work. And so having the ability and access that we have at Stetson to a large format printer, that was really cool. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about the technology that I was using Photoshop, and I was using these. A lot of people are using them with their clone stamps and content-aware technology, and so just sort of letting the computer fill in the gaps just based on the imagery that is from the Oscar bloomer that I picked, that I thought that was sort of my leeway to collaborating with this person who's no longer here. And so because I had a little push and pull in conversation with the computer and what the computer chose to do when I used these different content-aware tools, yeah, it felt like there was another being there. So I think it was a good stand-in. For sure.
Would you call it partner or more like servant?
Oh no! Okay, yeah. I feel like, yeah, I think a little bit of both. But there's no way that I could do it without Photoshop, without the content aware. It wouldn't be. There's so many exciting moments that would happen when I would use it, when I would use the content aware, and the computer would sort of pick from all these different parts of Oscar Blumner and sort of fill it in and create a whole new painting. And it was just sort of like, you know, like I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. So like I feel like there was definitely a partnership, but I'm like, I guess it's a servant. I did pay, Adobe, you know, like I pay for these subscriptions, so yeah.
And the type of installation, it's almost, it demands a presence in the gallery space. And with work like ceramics, like what Katie's been doing, if we were to, in this day and age, translate that into a digital interface only, seeing it just on a website, seeing it just in video, is there anything lost in dealing with ceramics?
Yeah, I don't know if ceramics is the right word. It's definitely a moment that the field is having right now. NCEGA, which is our national conference, keeps inching towards all of these other digital hands, whether it's video or performance and then digitally photographing or 3D printing. I don't think anything is lost. I feel like it's only kind of forcing us to examine the material in different ways. So there are just more tools available now. It's a fun time to be in clay.
The camera was invented and painters were put out of work, but it also liberated them to, you know, paint with their emotion or to paint by feeling instead of having to record live. You find something similar in Claire? People are being more experimental? Or?
Yes, definitely. But I think they were always experimental. So it's just, again, a different way of experimenting, more tools at our disposal, more interconnectivity across the interwebs, and being able to share ideas, Instagram, personal websites, video, people kind of sharing their actual studio practice via streaming. It's wild, yeah.
Professor Molnar, would you say the same would be true for video? I know you're a painter and you did a video work, but in the gallery space we can control almost anything, the lights, the sound, the placement, the seating. And if we move even further into a virtual space, you have that much more control. Are things lost or gained through video or film work as it translates into other mediums?
I mean, I think it depends what you're talking about. I think paintings, absolutely. Like, you cannot experience a painting digitally, or you can experience it, but it's not the same experience. Paintings have to be seen in life, is what I'm trying to say. I think it's an interesting question for video art in particular, because I do think, there's something to be said for the experience. It's the same as kind of going to the movies, right? Versus watching something on your computer at home. You get the story, you get kind of the overall feel, but on your like dinky little MacBook speakers, right? It's very different than sort of the all-encompassing kind of feeling. And we didn't, this show didn't offer the artists the chance to come in and install their own work. We did a pretty simple loop screen setup. But I know a lot of video artists, some of these artists included as well, do kind of consider themselves installation artists, and when they're installing shows, they pair photography with it, they pair found objects, they create very specific spaces, and so I do think they're also interested in that kind of all-encompassing experience, and in controlling, what people experience, but also the quality of it. So making sure that projections and sound and all of that is actually the quality it was shot at, and not just whatever Vimeo kind of compresses it to. So I think all to say, like, uploading things to the web is amazing and obviously makes things so much more accessible. But I do think you just lose that element of control and making sure that the experience is actually unified across people.
Yeah, good point. So considering that we're all in this gallery space at a panel talk talking about digital, and you're all faculty members, I was hoping maybe to. It looks like we've got a comment from the page itself. Let Madison know she is making her husband proud.
Oh too embarrassing.
Three of my favorite artists. So that's the reality for a lot of us right now. Significant others or children or somebody else at home for the foreseeable kind of future. And as you're all professors, how are you handling this shift in the middle of a semester to go from teaching a physical practice like painting, like clay, digital work in physical spaces, and shifting to an online platform?
Is the womb too fresh?
Are they losing the same element where you need to be present and
I hate to say it, but they're losing a lot. I think the main thing is just time in the studio space together and sort of live feedback. We're losing critiques. I think we're going to be able to kind of supplement pretty well by doing kind of like live chats or videos for people who want them. I will say I'm pretty lucky in that most of my students are local or close enough by that they can actually just take their painting supplies home and are just painting at home. So really, like, what they're able to do physically has not changed so much. Some of them, are now having to work a little bit smaller, stay a little bit neater, but are more or less what I'm asking them to do has not shifted drastically. But that's really just like a luck thing, that people are nearby. Like my seniors are still able to kind of complete their work and have access to the studios. One thing I will say that is sort of relevant to the hand and has been interesting is for all my classes, I always require students to go to a certain number of exhibitions or lectures and write responses to them. And so that obviously is not really possible anymore, especially for students who have left the area and gone home to the places that may or may not have galleries and museums open. So instead, there are now actually a ton of platforms that are doing really interesting things online as sort of a response to the social distancing. So Brooklyn Rail every single day at 1 p.m. is having a lunchtime conversation that's live streamed with an artist talking about their practice, and that's every single day for the foreseeable future, which is amazing, and they're really amazing artists. They had Shireen Shot earlier this week. And then I found the National Gallery of Art. It has an archive of all of their invited lectures. So they have really great people. They have an art historian talking about James Turrell. They have Mark Bradford talking about his work. And then obviously like Art 21 and Canopy has all these like amazing films that I always want to encourage students to see, but there's never really enough time to kind of make that a requirement or fit it into class. So now I'm like, now's the time to like watch all this stuff and respond to it. And also a bunch of galleries are, Sakima Jenkins uploaded like a full e-catalog of Kara Walker's drawing show that's up right now, which is much more than usually gets uploaded online. So people are kind of supplementing their exhibitions with like much more web-based photos and documentation and videos and interviews and all this stuff. So that's, I think, kind of exciting, and I hope that's something that now people realize they can do it, and hopefully that sort of continues and we see that an uptick in that for the future too.
Yeah. Madison, how are you staying fresh in the communities surrounding arts? Are there sites you're going to? Are there things you're looking forward to?
Oh my gosh, how am I staying fresh? I'm just trying to keep my head above water. No, I feel like, Lisa, you named some really great ones. I know that there's some Instagram accounts that are trying to shine light. Actually, a lot of just individual Instagram artists are shining light on other artists that are their followers. So I think that that's kind of lovely that, like right now, I'm just seeing so much new art, and I also feel like because we have nowhere to be, we're all like tuning in a little bit more, so it's a chance for some artists that maybe don't have many followers, or like this is their first like MFA or BFA show. It's going to be seen by many, many more people. It has a much wider reach, so I think that that's really cool, and also kind of like thinking about that from my seniors, for them to have that similar opportunity, because right, their senior exhibition is not something that's going to be widely attended physically, and so for it to be offered online, and then also posted through some of these other venues on Instagram, I think that there's going to be people who would never have seen this work that can see it. So I'm kind of hoping that that is like this slight little silver lining. Yeah, but yeah, it's pretty awful right now. So I don't know. I'm like, I can't. Katie, your answer.
Katie, how are you keeping the social distancing?
Well, okay, I got a group of outlier students who saw me earlier in my attire, still firing kilns, still loading, still unloading. I have seniors trying to just wrap up their physical projects that are so close to being done. So I feel like we owe it to them to just get it there. And then also we have the internet again, which is exploding with information and friends, shining a light on friends. I've also encouraged my students to, uncover emails, or if artists have listed other contact information, to actually contact these people and have a conversation, because they're never as far away as they seem, especially when they're in a gallery setting or in a video, and have like a real life conversation, because that's all we have, the space for right now. So I think it's just like a shifting of gears. It's not that hands-on classroom experience, unfortunately, but it's forcing us more into the looking at work, which I think is a great place to be. Usually artists kind of come into that themselves when they're like really heavily in that looking mode and researching and discovering. So we're all kind of pushed into that space right now, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we just need to kind of shift those gears and get used to it, and then come back ready to rip.
So we can get a little bit lighter, I guess. And maybe bring it back to the exhibits. Is there, so I was here helping to unpack a lot of the work for Clay Legacies that came in. And it's a little bit like Christmas. Each box is a bit of a surprise. But was there anything that really jumped out to you? Something that you had seen, maybe digitally, and then when you saw it in person, it was just overwhelmingly gorgeous, right?
I think it's like every time. It's also like every time you open the kiln when a glaze firing is done, or coming into an exhibition, you're like, Betty Woodman stuff is how big, or whatever it is. Yeah, it's always exciting, I think, for the people in it, especially when you've like fantasized and seen things in the 2D, and then you get to it in the 3D and you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't anything. And then on top of that, the utilitarian objects, being able to actually touch, and this is so light, or this is a lot heavier, a lot grittier, or whatever it is, that experience is also like the icing on top. So yeah, all of them.
Well, Lucia, you put together a series of films that are like really engaging, and even I found myself just at first just kind of looking away, because we're so, we're presented with imagery and film all the time. But when you actually sit down in the space and give it a chance and give it a shot, then you can see how well done they are. But is there anything in particular, one of these videos, one of these films that stood out, or a series of, or a few of them even?
Sure. One of them, so Christopher Lineberry, who's a close friend of mine, he finished, this is a brand new piece for him, So as far as I know, this is the first time it's been exhibited. He finished it in January of this year. And he had told me, this is a piece about, in which he interviews his father, who is a student at Duke University, who's a student at University of Richmond, and then transferred to Duke University, in part because he had a close friend there who was also a man and expressed romantic feelings towards him, and he was uncomfortable with that. And Chris is a gay man, and so it was this sort of interesting intergenerational dialogue, really vulnerable on both parts, and just a really beautiful kind of interview. And I had never seen the piece until he sent me the file, and I was really kind of blown away by it, and very pleasantly surprised by just how intimate and vulnerable and honest it was. And then another piece that I think a lot of people, from what I've heard, responded to in the exhibit as well is Carrie Scarbacca's piece. He's from Tennessee and now teaches in Oregon. And it's a piece that's part of a larger series called White Noise, where he is sort of interested in this kind of alternate history of himself. So Carrie grew up in this a rural town in Tennessee. It's actually the town where the KKK started. And is now an art professor living in Oregon, but he kind of imagines this alternate history where he sort of fell into kind of white supremacist ideology, into like this racist kind of history, and sort of imagines himself as this like white male terrorist almost. And the piece that, so it's a larger photo and video series, but the video that's in the show, it's called All In, and it's a pretty long, about 15-minute video of him completely shaving his head and beard, and he has this very intense gaze and kind of holds you throughout the whole video. And I'd seen a preview of it online and sort of knew about his work when I reached out to him, but actually sitting in the darkened space and watching the full thing, it's really enthralling, and you kind of find yourself trying to hold your breath through the entire thing. It's really sort of kind of punches you, and then when you read what he's thinking about, it sort of unfolds all these emotions as to why you're responding to him in this way, and what sort of people you're sort of associating him with, and why is this, why is this figure both kind of scary and empathetic to you? So that piece also kind of surprised me, seeing it, in its full form in the space.
Yeah. Well, to go along with that theme on being surprised by seeing what's in the gallery space, Madison, I think, had probably the largest hurdle to get over considering audience. This, for those of you that don't know, this is a very atypical version of an Oscar Bloomer show at the Hand Art Center at Stetson University. She definitely applied herself to it, and it breaks from this traditional kind of installation, which the community here had been used to. For the longest time, we had Roberta Fabus as the curator. She actually came by and saw the show and absolutely loved it. So that's exactly what I was going to say.
Sweating bullets when I knew that she was going to come by.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, okay, so I'm not an art historian, and I feel like working in that gallery, it's always been art historians or someone who's working towards being an art historian, curating that space. And so for me to curate it, I was looking at things that visually just sort of worked together, which I feel like is, he's an artist, and so I think that's probably working in a similar way that he would be thinking. But yeah, I was so nervous to think about, like, what are these people who really know what they're talking about, have studied this work, what are they going to think about this? And the first person was Katya, and she wrote me an email that said, "You're a goddess," and I was like, okay, all right, I can breathe, this is okay. I was like, oh, thank God. And then Roberta also loved it, but I feel like there was just a lot of really great feedback, which I was kind of sort of surprised, because I thought that maybe there'd be some more pushback of like, oh no, this is like you're moving too fast, but it seems like a lot of people are embracing it, and I'm kind of hearing some rumblings from other people that maybe could think of different collaborations of working with Oscar Blumner in their sort of field. So I'm kind of hoping that there'll be more exhibitions sort of like that. Not exactly. Don't copy me. But yeah.
Well, we do want to keep everybody, but I'm hoping that maybe we could give us a few parting words of advice, something on a positive note,
Okay.
things that you're doing art related or just life related to keep us all going. Anyone?
Well, I started a garden. I'm spending a lot of time outside. I have some like fruit trees. I've been picking all the fruits. So I feel like, yeah, spending a little bit more time in nature and getting that vitamin D. I also have a beautiful loom that I'm very excited to start weaving. Yeah, just gonna pivot. I'm gonna pivot my art practice a little bit because I have that luxury.
Yeah.
Which I think will be nice.
Yeah, and most of us will have to pivot in some way or another. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the spirit of spring, we were just talking about cleaning out some of the
That's
spaces
true.
that are around the studios
That's
that
the time.
don't have a lot of attention paid to them throughout the semester when things are crazy. So getting things in shape. Also dipping my toe back into my own work, both performative and in a little bit of object based medium. Loading a salt kiln soon.
So you'll be in good company doing deep cleaning with
Yeah.
the rest of the world.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just make a little plug and tell you all quickly which of these videos are available online. Stephanie Sutton's Heavy set is available
Yes.
online. Carrie Scarbaca's All In, a short clip, is available online.
Yes.
April Dawkins' Cutter is available
Yes.
online. Virginia Urick's Shake the Snakes is available online. Marissa Williamson's What Would Sally Do is available online. Kat Shannon's An Exchange of Nourishment, and there are many versions, are all available online. TJ Ditto Norris's Mika Jean Still a Life is available online. You have to search Mika Jean on YouTube. And Brooke C. White's Liquid Gold is also available online. So that should keep you occupied for about 2 hours.
So deep cleaning, pivot your artwork, and stay connected.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else you guys want to add before we close?
Thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody else for listening as well. We're going to sign off and just do a little round of applause.
For
Yay,
ourselves.
for ourselves. Thanks again. Handartcenter.org.